pudding snacks.
What it do, Snacker, Snack X's? It's your boy Gage. Got jokes in the building and sinners in the building, and it's time for another episode of Spoiler Boys.
Spoiler Boys.
That's correct. And we are here to spoil episode 4 of Loki. Gentlemen, let's do what we know we're supposed to do and get some scores. Sin, I'm starting with you.
7.
Jokes?
Same place, 7.
Okay, I'm at an 8.
Okay.
This episode, this show's a little wild. To say the least. But for me personally, this episode, I think it's the best episode.
I will agree.
So far, anyway. I think it does way more right than it does wrong. I have far fewer issues with this episode than I have with other issues. We got questions answered.
Yeah.
Took witness protection out of there for once. Sort of. Maybe. But I feel like it leaves just as many questions as it answers. And again, I feel maybe a little bit better about where we're going to be at the end of the show now than I did at the end of, again, coming through the halfway point and being like, I don't know about this. So I feel better about where we're heading. So I want to do this. You guys are both at 7s. Why are you at a 7, Sin?
I think the show is I'm just losing interest in the show overall. Once we get to the end, I think that's the problem. Like, I'm watching it and I find myself falling asleep watching it. And I'm like, nope, I gotta run that back. And I'm wide awake like in the middle of the day at work. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not like tired or anything like that. It's just when you're trying to piece the puzzles together and trying to figure out what's going on and stuff seems like it's not making sense, like you said, with previous episodes and everything. It's like, I think I'm just at the point where I'm like, all right, let me just watch this so we can get through this and get this thing finished and get it over with. At the end, though, I was like, okay, now I really want to know what happens next episode. Like, okay, like how it all came to an end with the explosion and all that kind of stuff. Like, okay, now where are we going with this type of deal? Like, I get it. Whatever, he remains king to conquer, whatever. Okay, something's about to happen with all that, like we said, and he's gonna, be the big bad or whatever type of deal thing. But it's just, all right, now how do we get to that point from here? I can see it happening. It's just everything else beforehand, it was just like, okay. The time stuff was kind of cool with Ouroboros and not He Who Remains, but Victor Timely, when they met each other. That was kind of, the whole loop with them or whatever was kind of interesting. That was pretty cool. Yeah, and like you said, with stuff we've been looking for, getting answers to, we got an answer for what happens to Loki in the hallway. So apparently proved itself.
He said, "This will make sense."
Which is what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So this will make sense. I promise you.
Yeah. So I think that's why I'm at a 7. Let's how these conversations go. They could change.
Jokes. What about you?
I think for me, the good side was the fact that we did get a lot of questions answered, and I think because of the way that it was presented, there was a lot more conversations and talking in the episode than necessary. We had a few moments where there was some action, really kind of like the middle, and obviously the end when things took the big bang for it. So I think sometimes for me, when you have to slow things down a little bit to get all those explanations, and not say that it's sacrificed necessarily a lot of the action for it, I felt maybe that made it a little bit slower. But definitely, I think it was needed, especially where we are, to kind of get a lot of those answers in versus trying to get to the very last episode and then just try to, here's every single answer that you guys were looking for. So I think they probably needed to just do that little bit of the slowdown for a minute. And the hope is these last 2 episodes, I feel like obviously with going into the next one, we're kind of in that playing field right now where we're like, whoa, like, where are we really going? Because like we got theories. I know we all got theories, but this one's going to be one of those that we're going to have to kind of really suss through until we get the episode.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, the way this episode plays out, I think it is back to like giving some answers for questions that like they seem to even have, right? And having, now that like Timely is there, right, and is again like him meeting Ouroboros and them having that conversation of like, well, wait a minute, if like I learned what I know from you and you learned what you know from me, then who's first? And so like, yeah, like who wrote the book? Like,
which came first?
Like, how is that even? How is that even
in the age conversation right now?
And it's like it is, but it isn't. And again, I definitely have theories. I think that might be my favorite thing about this episode is that they tried to infinity ward this joint.
Yeah.
Like just at the end, like you just like what?
Yeah.
So like,
I'm sitting there like, wait.
I thought we were going to get a little something.
Was it the finale? Like, did somebody upload the finale early? Like, is that it? Like,
hey, look, when after the screen went black for a second, I was like, oh, we're about to see something right quick.
Because it was a long pause. Yeah. Then the credits start rolling. I was like, what?
That was literally the Infinity War zone right there.
Yeah, for them to do that and have no after credit scene, I don't know, it just did something to me that was like gave me confidence for some reason again, because I'm like, oh, they went hard, like that's going hard, you know what I mean? So all right, there's a few things that happened in this episode that I think are extremely important. One, the early conversation with the judge in B15 where the judge is trying to convince B15 that like she can go in there and talk to Docs and get Docs to switch sides, if you will. Not really switch sides, but just exploit the fact that she's doing what she does for the love of the TVA, and that it's just that they now have varying opinions on what that means and how they're supposed to protect the TVA. And she's like, man, that ain't no talking to her. And judge is like, don't be so sure. Like, you changed my mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, they're seeing things collectively that they've never seen before. I think it, you know, when you think about them being in that space, and even like all of them who were in that room, like the judgment conference in the very beginning of the show, all saw a Loki time slip. What I'm not positive of is whether or not all of them know that's not a thing that's supposed to be able to happen in the TVA, because the TVA is a place that exists outside of time, and so there shouldn't be the ability to do that. At the same time, time does absolutely pass in the TVA. It has to. Like, it's not. It is clearly there's a full-on time loophole, but time has to pass in the TVA or you couldn't slip, right? Because
Loki wouldn't be able to go to the future and past and prove himself and all that type of stuff. Yeah, there's time also.
There's not, right. So it works differently, and I don't know that we're ever going to get an explanation of how it works differently, because I think that would be too much math. I've seen theories that the TVA exists within like a black hole, and that's why it's like outside of time or something like that. Which, like, yeah, we're like, oh, okay, but like, what else are we supposed to say? Like, what do we know about?
Right?
Yeah, it's something made up. Like, okay,
yeah.
I believe that we've never really traversed the black hole before, so okay.
Like, all right, fine, it works. The math is mathing.
But convincing B-15, like, she's in a, I don't know, man. I feel like I would have been in a place like, yeah, we got juice all in, because they just not, like, it's not worth it, right? But clearly for her, she's been the main person who's been like, when we prune these timelines, we're killing all these people, and that's not okay, right? Which I also think is a little weird. I'll have to kind of, I don't know, get with y'all on that. But I mean, it's if they're all branch timelines, then sure, a lot of the people on those timelines are variants of other people that are on those timelines. So when you prune a timeline, you are basically removing timelines where these people are still alive on a sacred timeline, right? But not necessarily, because once you change the branch, different people get together, different people are born. Some people may have already died on one timeline, but they're not dead in this timeline, or whatever. Well, I guess no, that wouldn't work either. Like, if you're dead, you're already dead, because that's already happened before the branch hits time. Y'all.
How it gets crazy confusing.
Yeah, but certainly there could be people that are born after the branch that wouldn't be otherwise, that are entities that wouldn't exist if that branch hadn't happened, right? If that hadn't happened. When she goes in there to talk to Docs, I didn't think there was nothing doing. Like, the way that Docs and B-15, and X5 are talking, X5 in there putting his actor moves on. She put the, like, we know what you did, Bradley.
With the hard joint.
Yeah, with the full accent, like. And then my man was like, "Oh, you know about that?" Yeah. You just happen to be on a timeline they wasn't planning to branch, because it was the sacred timeline. You know what I'm saying? But so he was safe until they got done what they were doing, and then I feel like they was gonna come get him. That's what I think was going down. But watching Miss Minutes spill the beans to Renslayer about He Who Remains, and hearing basically them have the same conversation that Loki heard in like episode 1, like recording. Yeah. One, why is there a recording of that? But two,
that's a great question.
That's a good.
Who recorded that?
That seems like one of those things where she went like just to do it, or she went back in time, kind of like how they gave Victor the TVA book. Kind of like she realized afterwards, it's like, you know what?
Move things in a certain direction.
Let me go put this recording on so that Joe can record while I was actually having that conversation. And it's gonna set up something else.
Yeah. Miss Minutes and Renslayer decided, after seeing that conversation and her showing Renslayer, like, this what he did. You know what I mean? Like, she basically was the leader of his time war. I imagine that means that she helped him defeat all the other kings.
Facts.
And I'd be happy to leave by your side. But psych though, because as soon as my man said, I'll
Yep.
be there.
I was like, oh, nope. It's not going the way you thought, Red Slayer.
Nah. But it's interesting that when he called Miss Minutes, she looked the way we're used to seeing her. But the first thing she said when he popped up was, "What's up? You trying to play chess?" Like,
Yeah.
So I don't know how old that version of her was or not. You know what I mean? Like, she clearly has some autonomy. He tells her what to do. Run Protocol 42. We back to 42, y'all. This Sin, you ever go back and rewatch Spider-Verse and see all them 42s?
No, I didn't. I do need to remember to do that when I watch it again to look for 40s. Not completely went over my head when I watched it.
You slipping. You back to 42s, y'all. Run Protocol 42 is basically his Order 66. Erase all their memories. I don't want nothing to do with it. Why do you think he did that, Jokes?
It seems like it's kind of going back to how we see Victor Timely when it comes time for like that partnership thing. It seems like once she gets too close to him, or like he realizes like we're going down the same path again, it's like we need to reset and start over again. So I don't know if maybe a version of him, or if it was him, maybe once they got too close to each other, I'm guessing maybe she stabbed them in the back or something. And maybe in him knowing something like that, this is why we have to just keep starting over again, because we're getting too close. And I just think he's maybe one is a little bit scared of the relationship piece that it looks like that the two of them are building, but he's conscious enough to still put a wall in between it and not actually let it fully come to fruition on it. Like that's at least that's what I'm gaining.
That's where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know exactly what happens in the war that has already been fought and what her role is, but clearly the TVA already exists when that happens. So when the Kang War becomes what it is, the TVA is already a thing because she's there fighting. Now, maybe what it does is something completely different. You know what I mean? Other than them fighting or whatever in the war. And that to me means he must have all these soldiers that are out there pruning people or attempting to at least prune Kangs or something like that, right? In order to help win the war and set it to where it is. But he also talks about having given them what they were promised, which is this utopia at the end of time. And part of me thinks that he knows that's not actually possible. That like timelines are going to continue to branch, and he's going to continue to need people to prune it in order to keep the sacred timeline the way it is. But he also has to know that they're on a loop. And so that means that like what he promised them, it makes me feel like all of the people who he originally went and got and pulled to join the TVA, that they joined like willingly. Like, hey, this is what's going on. We're literally fighting to save time. And he promised them either not maybe something getting back to their own timelines, right? But it forced me to kind of think back to the kind of stuff that he was saying when he was talking to Janet in Ant-Man, and he was talking about the war and saying like how bad it was, and like you get these visions of like just the fighting and whatever. And so in all of these other timelines where a Kang exists, and all of these Kangs are trying to be the ruler of time, and the way they're doing it, remember that like Slim was like wiping out like whole basically timelines of people, like killing all of these people. So it's possible that Kang found people in like all of these other timelines and were like, listen, if you stick with me, if you follow me, we can win this thing, and I can bring you peace. Like, we don't have to do war, we don't have to, whatever. and he promised them this utopia. And to an extent, I think that utopia is the TVA as we saw it when Loki gets there. Where they're all just kind of going about their daily thing, doing their jobs, but they seem like, if you think about like how happy Mobius seems to like be content, even once he finds out he's a variant, but they're just happy. They're just like, oh, you like pie? There's a whole room full of just pie. You know what I'm saying? Like
that pie room still has me. I'm like, why is there a whole room? I feel like somehow that's going to come into play for something. It may not even be something major, but it's just.
No, I do too.
No, I think Gage is hitting it on the nail with this is like their utopia type of thing. Like he sent everybody, like he sent Renslayer back, wiped their memory. We've done what I need them to do. The TVA's established. I have them in that place. They need to stay there and keep working the timelines. They don't need to remember this. They have one job to do, to keep all the Kings at bay, and let's do that. So
they get to live forever.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? They get all the food they need. Y'all can have all the pie you want. Pie. Now they do pay for it. Like they have these little tokens or whatever that if you look like what it costs for pie, what it
hot
costs
cocoa.
For
I got a hot cocoa machine.
Yeah,
hey, listen,
cocoa soup.
You have a machine. Hot cocoa. Like, that show got my man.
Yeah.
He forced my man to drink some hot cocoa.
I think my favorite part of this episode is when they reset Miss Minutes.
That's about to say that's my favorite part because of the look on Loki and Sylvie's face. I was like, we all got that face right now. I'm like, it says what? I mean, turn that thing off so we can do our job.
Was like, let us turn get our magic. No, but it wasn't even that for me. It was her turning back to the old digital analog clock looking joint. Threatening him, sort of being like, you'll never be him with like, and she looks like she's dead.
Hey,
like
that joint was creepy.
She looked like a zombie kind of thing or whatever, right? But when she starts to break up and she's like saying, you know what I mean, as an AI, and my man Victor Tommy is like, it's not cool to make fun of me, dog. Like, because he has that stutter, and now she's like, you know, it's like he never seen like a machine glitch, you know what I'm saying, or whatever. Like, she basically did a Max Headroom, which I don't even know if you know what that is.
No, I'm about to say jokes definitely don't know what that is.
I'm gonna make you you got homework. You know, she starts to glitch and keeps repeating herself, and he's like offended because he feels like she's making fun of him stuttering. I just thought that joint was clean. You know, Renslayer and Miss Minutes have decided they're gonna try to take over the TVA. Renslayer shows up in the room after that first conversation with Dox, and Dox has already been convinced that all right, B-15 might be right, and they just willing to do. The rest of them just like, yeah, let's do whatever Dox do, we gonna do. Like, I'm with that. And when Renslayer shows up hot, like, yeah, we don't even need him. We could just do this. Which is the other thing that I feel like is the problem that he who remains has, is that these other people around, he knows there will always be people that are power hungry, that want that control or want to be in charge or whatever, and it's always going to be a problem, right? And so wipe their memories, and I don't share it with nobody. Like, I don't do partnerships. So when she shows up and tries to convince him, like, you can have your life back on a timeline, and the only person who's in that room who's had a life on a timeline is my man X5. And X5 is like, come on, y'all. Yep, that's it. And she's like, was it that good, Bradley? You just you'd be willing to just. My man, like, yeah, it was good.
It was
you know
lit.
what I'm saying? But again, he was famous, he was rich. You know what I'm saying? He living it up. Other people, life on a timeline might have been
completely,
you know, like, again, not that Sylvie wasn't perfectly happy working at McDonald's.
Very true.
These two very different lives. You know what I mean? Like, she was happy because of what she'd been through, but you know, and they cubed them all, and I was a little shocked. I'm not even gonna play. I was kind of shocked that they all got
boxed.
smushed.
I don't know what you want to.
And now X5 is like, again, I made a mention of this in one of the earlier episodes that he is basically, what's the name for the Matrix? Who's like, put me back in the Matrix.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to know about none of this. I just want
no memories. Just put me in, make me
taste steak, and I want to be famous, and I want to be, and that's basically who he is. So now he just like, man, I kill everybody on the Nebuchadnezzar. I'm ready to go back.
Yeah, just give me back.
Yeah. Which I can appreciate, but I'm glad Sylvie got her magic back. So, we find out that Loki pruned himself. We kind of now understand how this time loop is beginning to work in its own circle. I think for the first time, it makes sense to Loki. And I also feel like Loki never questioned. I think that's my biggest issue with this, is that I don't feel like Loki ever brought up like, oh yeah, by the way, I never pruned myself. I don't know who pruned me, but somebody did. Right? So we know what happened as far as that's concerned. Victor Timely and Ouroboros work feverishly to try to get the time loom squared away and fix the issue that they would have with the time loom. And I'm going to tell you what, I have a theory that the timekeepers are the three of them, or at least are supposed to be a version of the three of them. Ouroboros, Victor Timely, and Casey, I think, are like the representatives of the three people who are the only people who know enough about how everything works to keep everything working in that loop. Because the other thing is that Ouroboros seems to be in some ways immune to some of the thing. Like, he remembers things that like nobody else can remember. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just is a little weird, again, what his position in it is. But here's where I'm at, and this is what I really need to get from you all. When Victor Timely, when they finally get to the point, they figure it out, they shut down, Dox is gone. My man X5 gets enchanted and walks in the room in a very listen, my man killed it, because he straight up was Sylvie when he walked in that room. Come here. I ain't think I was gonna see you again so soon. Straight pruned her.
Didn't see that coming.
I mean, we'll talk. And then wakes up like, oh no, what did I do? Victor Timely's like, I gotta be the one to go in the thing, because I'm the only one who understands it enough that if something goes wrong, I could actually fix it. Which one of y'all made noise out loud when he stepped out the door? My man. Me too. Me too.
Hey, listen. It was a subtle thought to myself, how we've been talking about like how things are getting worse out there, and just knowing from when Mobius went out there and how the suit was going, I was just thinking, I was like, either Victor Timely's about to go out here and he's about to be somebody else or something, because I'm like, something's not going to go right. I didn't think it was going to be my man was going to completely like just straight up disintegrate out there, but I knew something was going to be bad. Like, I thought maybe he was going to immediately run out there, shit was just going to be like, oh, this isn't going to work, turn back around, just come right back in, we got to figure something else out. Well, my man just straight dissolved. I was like, I was literally was sitting here like how they were standing in there looking at him or looking outside. Like,
I'm with you, Joe. I was waiting for anything else but that to happen. Like, okay, Victor's gonna be the one to go out there. Okay, cool. All right. So something's about to happen out there with the radiation and him trying to do it to do something to him to push him towards the big bad type of thing. And as soon as over, he just got vaporized. I was like, oh, okay. Now what are we gonna do? And then
correct.
Time's up. Like
everybody else is like, now what are you gonna do? I think here's the thing. I think that they have done a brilliant job of convincing us that Victor Timely is he who remains.
Yeah.
Especially because once they scan his aura into the system, they called him he who remains. Oh, what up, he who remains? Y'all can open everything up now, whatever.
That's where I thought they was going to go side with. I thought they were going to do that, and that thing was going to be like, nope, this is not the temporal aura that you need. And it was going to
something,
be
right?
Yeah.
No, they just like, nah. Oh, he who remains, you the one. But I'm not convinced now that he is he who remains.
And you know what? It makes sense if you think about it, because they Renslayer Miss Minute started his whole path, honestly, by giving him the TVA book in the timeline, which honestly I don't think was technically supposed to happen. But when Miss Minute, says that this is where he said that we need to deliver this to, I'm guessing it's more of maybe that's what she wanted to do. So I'm thinking they were trying to create their own He Who Remains, maybe that they thought was going to actually side and work with them.
I can tell you what I think it is. I think you're part right. I think this all part of the plan. I think He Who Remains wanted that to be done. But if you remember, we talked about this a couple of episodes ago, and I think this is part of why the show is confusing. I think what they should have done is when they go to a different time, when they put the words on the screen for where they are and say that it's in the sacred timeline, it should be white, because the sacred timeline on every screen you look at is a white line. And then when they're on branch timelines, they're always like orange. And then once they get past the critical point, they're like red. I think when they tell you where they are, if it was a branch timeline, it should be in like orange. It should be a different color.
Yeah.
Right? To just make it easier for you to follow along. I think that's the most important thing. When they gave him the book, they created branch timelines. What that means to me is there are infinite number now of that same child who has that book, and they all did different things with it. But that Victor Timely is the only one who made a time loom that could make the timeline, make the sacred timeline. So they needed somebody who could create it and could do the things that were necessary that need to be in the book in order to maintain the timeline. But that is something that a different Kang is aware of, and that whoever that Kang is he who remains. And that person knows Victor Timely is the person who needed to be the person to complete that Ouroboros circle of, you wrote the book? Nah, I wrote the book. I learned what I know from you. Well, learn what I know from you, until they get together. And when they get together, they start to do things that only one of them could, like they hadn't learned from each other, and coming up with things that they wouldn't have outside of that. And then the only other person again who seems to know or understand or is able to help them with that is Casey. That's why I'm in this place where I'm like, the three of them I think might be the timekeepers. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little strange, but that's kind of where I'm at. Now that we've blacked out, only honestly because, we've seen the trailers for the show. Do I have an idea of where we're really going now that this happened? But I don't think the idea that the thing exploded and then everything went black, I think is now all the timelines are free. There is nothing controlling them and pushing them into a sacred timeline, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. other than the fact that there's a bunch of Kangs, right? It just means that there are all these timelines that exist. And so when that explodes, and you're like, well, what does that mean? I think it means that everybody in those rooms, everybody who was still alive in the TVA, is now on a different timeline.
I was gonna,
I think that joint just forces everybody
back to where they were.
Either where they. I have a slightly similar kind of thing to that. Now, this for me, as I'm thinking maybe way too far ahead. Seeing as that we already kind of know where some of these movies are going, knowing about Secret Wars and the Kang thing. What if, into trying to make, obviously we're going to change things up a little bit in the MCU. So maybe we don't do the whole battle world thing where things separate and, you know, focuses on these different worlds or whatever. What if it's the timeline that we're going to use for kind of the example of that? Because as of now, we don't know if this is going to necessarily affect anything else. But what if maybe everything implodes like this? Everybody does show up in these different timelines. Someone, like, obviously is not necessarily a branch timeline, a sacred timeline, since everything is separate. But this is how we create like our like battle world scenario. And this is where we kind of see some of these characters start showing up together that we necessarily don't have an example of yet. So like, for example, Deadpool and Wolverine. Obviously right now, as far as MCU wise, there's not a technical way that I guess they should be together. But maybe now with the timelines kind of exploding and going different places, we can kind of see some of these characters start showing up with each other. I could, like, obviously I'm just shooting for the fences here, but I think with all these different timelines that are going to be just out there and available, maybe this is what the MCU uses to not, let me say, attempt to not confuse people further past where they are right now.
I mean, I don't necessarily think you're wrong. I mean, like, Battle World is basically all the timelines coming together, and it's almost like they fight it out, and then now there's only one timeline. It basically is a formation of a sacred timeline. It's basically what that is. What we know is that if you watch a trailer again, you see Loki time slipping to places and times that we haven't seen him time slip. So he clearly ends up somehow still being able to time slip and time slipping in different places. What that means is if he's still time slipping, he's time slipping on a single timeline. As far as I can tell, right. That like that's basically what was happening in TVA. He's on a single timeline that exists inside the TVA as he knows it, and he's seeing the future, the past, you know, whatever. But we haven't seen Mobius and jet skis yet, and that appears to be what this is. There are shots of like Casey looking like he's in like jail or something. Look, maybe he's wrongfully accused or something or whatever, and they show up like, oh, we can get you out, you know, or whatever. There are shots of B-15, like they show all of them doing other things, like looking like they're living their other lives, you know what I'm saying, or whatever. And I think what we're seeing is that it turns out that Loki created the TVA.
Oh, okay.
I think he's time slipping, and he might be the one who's actually starting to collect all these people,
collect all the individuals, and
try to tell them there's this thing we have to do. We need to fix time. I need you, right? Because he knows who these people are, right? I need you. 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 You know what I mean, or whatever. And he knows to beware of Kang and of Timely's and, you know, whatever. So I think we might be getting ready to see him start collecting these people to bring them together to do the thing that needs to be done, which is form a thing, restart the TVA, because it's absolutely necessary,
right,
to happen. And that could also be why the TVA worked so hard and has removed so many Lokis from so many timelines is because in the end, they actually have to whittle it down to the only Loki that can restart it again. So they go to get rid of her.
Interesting.
That's the only thing that makes sense for me is like why you would grab Sylvie as a Loki when she's so young. Oh, she gotta go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she happens to escape, so she doesn't get pruned. But it's all technically part of the same loop. It's all part of the plan.
Yeah.
The other thing is when someone gets pruned, like when Loki got pruned, he ended up in that space, like at the end of time, where like stuff was all like these different time things blown together. He saw all the other Lokis. There are those scenes in the trailer where like Renslayer's just in that purple light, you know, or whatever. It looks like she's getting ready to come across that beast that I can't think of the name of the joint.
Yeah,
Loki had it looked like smoke dragon, you know, or whatever. But that dragon is supposed to have been created to protect her. So maybe that joint's not even gonna bother her. She might even be like,
that joint gonna come to her like just rub it on the head, like
a little pat.
Now like, all right, you my rider. You know what I mean? So yeah, she ends up, as far as I can tell, she got pruned. That's where she is.
Yep, agreed.
And it, you know, so I don't know what's going. I mean, again, that's what I'm thinking. This explosion just means that time is free now, and any number of things is possible. What that says to me right now, based on the end of this episode, when What If drop in December, that joint's gonna be wild.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. What If
that
will be fire?
Wild, and they're not gonna be able to fix this.
2 episodes left.
What it means is they're gonna fix it, right? But it can't get fixed and go back into a single timeline if they decide that's what they want to do until after Kang War. Until after it ain't happening in this show.
Yeah, nah.
You know what I'm saying? But I think we're gonna start to see the formation of what that is. And again, I think you're right, Jokes, that some of that freedom, and it also could just be that they're just like, yeah, we want to be able to do with Marvel what DC has been able to do, where they're just kind of like, yeah, there can be a Batman movie with a different person who's playing a different actor who's different from this person who plays Batman, right? Which is a thing I feel like they need to do for business purposes alone. That what the MCU is can only have lasted so long with the big stars, the huge stars they had, because they all are going to age out.
Yeah.
And now they'll be able to just be like, well, nah, he just isn't the only Captain America. You know what I mean? This isn't the only Iron Man. Slim is clearly like, because it worked for Spider-Man. Slim was clearly not the only Spider-Man. And like people are willing or were willing to accept what Spider-Verse is because they understand it by simply taking like, oh yeah, through all these years, there's been all these different movies that have had these different people that played Spider-Man, and people accepted it every time they did it. And not just in the movies, but different versions of animation, different comics, different comic books, right? Like it's just a thing that we're used to and the general public is used to. And the same thing with Batman. Like it works just fine with Batman. They have these different people and people complain about it. So-and-so about to be Batman, blah, 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 whatever. And then it just happens and they just move on. And now we just argue about
it and do it carefully for the public. It'll be accepted. Yeah. Just depending on how they feed it to the public. Yeah.
Again, we've been saying they've set themselves up to be able to do whatever they want. Bring in mutants, blah, 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 right? But I think more than that, they're putting themselves, from a business perspective of what this show is doing, they're putting themselves in a position where they're like, no, we really can do anything. Like, we don't necessarily have to get things back on a sacred timeline. We might be able to make it so it's all fine prior to, you know, whatever. Because if they defeat Kang, there can't be a sacred timeline.
Right.
Correct.
And I feel like that's where it's going, and that's where it has to differ. So even though we're in that circle, all of it is still supposed to happen. And at some point, it circles back to a point where the MCU is the only thing. And the Peter that we have is the Peter Parker we have. You know what I'm saying? Is what it is. Look, final thoughts on this episode. Anything you wanted to hit, Sam, we didn't hit?
Nah, we hit, we pretty much hit everything in this episode. I'm definitely looking forward to what happens next. Like, that ending was just like, okay, y'all have just thrown us for a complete loop here. So I'm really am genuinely anticipating the next episode just to see what comes next from the moon being destroyed, pretty much. So I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for it.
Jokes?
I think Sin hit it right on the head, right with that. Like, I think it's been since the beginning of this, we haven't really been like, don't get me wrong, we're gonna get into each episode because of who we are. But like this, with this hanging, this is literally like, just like you said, that Infinity War type of end right now. Like, this could have been like the end of the season and kind of been like, oh, this is gonna link into another movie or wherever it goes. But right now, it's just knowing what the destruction of the Loom really does for not only the TVA and Loki and them, but is this something that ends up spanning out? Because I mean, it's time, and at that point, that should affect everything. Almost like how in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., how something happened in the movie, and we got to see it in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's kind of the reverse scenario now. Something happened on Loki on one of the shows. Does that now affect everything else going forward? But
I mean, the Marvels is about to drop in like 3 weeks.
Perfect timing. So if by whatever the end of this, if Loki doesn't get whatever resolved and we see some more time issues, clearly that could have an impact on the Marvels.
100%. Yeah, I said what I need to say. We'll see what happens on the next episode, y'all. We're gonna wrap this one up. This has been your Spoiler Boys for episode 4 of Loki. I personally think this is the best episode so far. They could really mess this up in 2 episodes. But it feels like they're on the right path now. We'll see what happens. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Make sure y'all come back next week for episode 5. With that, we're out. Toodles and loose.
Loading snacks.